Imagine a place so radioactive that standing there for just minutes could change your body forever. A place where the ground itself glows with invisible danger. And yet, humans created it. Let me take you there. I'm Marie Curie, or at least let me guide you as I would. You see, radiation is not evil by nature. I devoted my life to understanding it, to harnessing its power for healing. But when misunderstood or misused, it becomes something else entirely. Something catastrophic. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine a place removed from time. Not destroyed, not erased, but simply left behind in the north of Ukraine. Near the quiet border of Belarus, there exists a vast restricted region known as the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone. It stretches for thousands of square kilometers, forests, rivers, empty roads, and silence. A silence that feels unnatural. At its heart lies the former Soviet city of Pripyat. Once it was full of life. Nearly 50,000 people lived there. Engineers, teachers, children. It was a young city. Optimistic, modern, built to serve a nearby nuclear power station. A symbol of progress. That station was the Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant. From a distance, it does not look like something dangerous. Concrete buildings, tall chimneys, quiet structures against the sky. Almost ordinary, but within those walls, atoms were being split. Energy was being released from the very core of matter, a force both elegant and unforgiving. The plant sits beside the Pripyat River, a calm body of water that reflects the sky as if nothing has ever been wrong. Trees surround the area, tall, patient witnesses to history. If you were to walk there today, you would hear the wind moving through leaves, the distant call of birds, your own footsteps echoing in emptiness. And yet, what defines this place is not what you can see. It is what you cannot. Radiation does not announce itself. It has no color, no smell, no sound. You could stand in a field that looks peaceful and still be surrounded by invisible particles moving through your body. This is what makes the location so unsettling. It appears calm, but beneath that calm lies something deeply unstable. The exclusion zone was created after the Chernobyl disaster, a boundary drawn not by walls but by danger. A 30-kilometer circle where human life was no longer considered safe. Villages were emptied, homes were abandoned mid-sentence. Toys left on floors, photographs still hanging on walls, and at the center of this vast, quiet expanse stands Reactor No 4. The source, the place where everything changed. It is now sealed beneath a massive steel structure designed to contain what still lingers inside, because even now, decades later, the ground remembers, the air remembers, the atoms themselves remember. This is not simply a location on a map, it is a scar, a place where human ambition met the raw power of nature and lost control. And perhaps what is most haunting is how ordinary it all appears. No glowing lights, no dramatic warning signs echoing through the sky. Just forests, buildings, silence. But within that silence is one of the most dangerous places on Earth. And it waits quietly, patiently, just as it has since 1986. It began not with chaos, but with routine. On the night of April 25th, 1986, inside Reactor No. At the Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant, engineers prepared for a test. A simple question guided them. If power were lost, could the reactor still cool itself long enough to prevent disaster? It was a reasonable question, but the way it was answered would change the world. The test was delayed, day turned to night, and as hours passed, the reactor was held at low power, an unstable condition for this particular design. Operators, under pressure, made adjustments. They withdrew control rods, the very mechanisms designed to regulate the reaction. Slowly, quietly, the reactor drifted into a dangerous state. But nothing looked alarming. No alarms screamed in panic. No visible signs warned of what was building beneath the surface. Because nuclear reactions do not behave like fire. They do not flicker and roar. They build invisibly. At 1:23 a.m., the test finally began. Steam flow changed, water levels shifted, and inside the core the reaction accelerated faster than anyone realized. Then an attempt to stop it. A single command, shutdown. Control rods were inserted back into the reactor. It should have ended everything. Instead, it triggered the unimaginable. Due to a critical design flaw, the rods initially increased the reaction rather than stopping it. In a fraction of a second, power surged, not doubled, not tripled, but multiplied beyond control. Fuel rods shattered, pressure exploded. And then a violent rupture. The first explosion tore through the reactor, lifting a 1,000-ton lid into the air. Moments later, a second explosion followed, exposing the core directly to the atmosphere. There was no protective barrier anymore. The heart of the reactor was open, graphite blocks ignited, burning in the open air. And with that fire, radioactive material began to rise into the sky. Not like smoke you could easily see and avoid, but particles carried by wind. Invisible, relentless, they drifted across fields, cities, entire countries. Back inside the plant, confusion filled the control room. Many did not believe the reactor had exploded. It seemed impossible, even as reality unfolded around them. Firefighters arrived within minutes. They climbed onto the roof. They fought flames with courage and without protection. To them, it was a fire. They did not know they were standing among fragments of the reactor core itself, pieces so radioactive that simply holding them for seconds would be fatal. Hours passed. The fire continued. Radiation spread silently, and the nearby city of Pripyat slept. No immediate alarm, no urgent evacuation, just the quiet presence of something already in the air, already in their bodies. By morning, people went about their day. Children played outside. Families walked beneath a sky carrying invisible danger. Only later, far too late, did the truth begin to emerge. The disaster would come to be known as the Chernobyl disaster, but in those first hours it had no name. Only confusion, only silence, only a chain of small decisions leading to an irreversible moment. And perhaps that is what makes it most profound. Not that it happened suddenly, but that it unfolded step by step, quietly until there was no way back. Let us slow down and look more closely, not at the explosion, not at the ruins, but at the invisible force behind it all. Radiation, you cannot see it, you cannot touch it, and yet it is always present. In truth, radiation is simply energy, traveling through space, sometimes as waves, sometimes as particles, the sunlight that warms your skin. That too is radiation, but what we speak of here is something far more penetrating, far more intimate. Inside every atom lies a nucleus, and sometimes that nucleus is unstable. When it changes, when it seeks balance, it releases energy. This is what we call radioactive decay. It is not an act of anger, but of transformation. Some atoms release small bursts, others release powerful emissions that can pass through solid matter, even through the human body. At the Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant, this process was not left to nature. It was intensified, controlled, or at least meant to be. Atoms of uranium were split in a chain reaction, each split releasing more energy and more neutrons, continuing the cycle. A delicate balance was required. Too little reaction, and nothing happens. Too much, and control is lost. When the reactor failed during the Chernobyl disaster, that balance disappeared. The reaction surged, and with it, a flood of radioactive materials escaped. Let us understand what that means for the human body. When high-energy radiation passes through living tissue, it does not burn like fire. It does something quieter, but more profound. It disrupts the very structure of cells. It breaks chemical bonds. It damages DNA, the instructions that tell your body how to live, repair, and grow. Sometimes the body can repair this damage. It is remarkably resilient, but when the exposure is too great, the damage accumulates faster than it can be healed. Cells begin to fail, tissues weaken. Systems collapse. This is what we call radiation sickness. Not immediate, not always visible at first, but deeply destructive. There are different kinds of radiation. Alpha particles, heavy but easily stopped. Beta particles, lighter, traveling further. And gamma rays, the most penetrating of all. Gamma radiation moves through the body like light through glass. Invisible, unstoppable, without proper shielding, at Chernobyl, all of these were present. Released into the air, into the soil, into the water, carried by wind, settling onto fields, into forests, onto rooftops and skin. And then there's something even more enduring, radioactive isotopes, elements like cesium-137 and strontium-90. They do not disappear quickly. They decay slowly over years, decades, even centuries, each moment releasing small amounts of radiation. Quietly, persistently, this is why the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone remains dangerous. Not because of a single event, but because of what was left behind. Radiation is not a storm that passes, it is a presence that lingers, and yet it is important to understand this clearly. Radiation is not evil. It does not choose, it does not intend harm. It follows the laws of nature, precisely, consistently. The same principles that caused destruction at Chernobyl also allow us to treat cancer, to see inside the human body, to explore the structure of matter itself. The difference lies not in the force, but in how we engage with it. With knowledge comes control, with ignorance comes risk. And so what happened at Chernobyl was not merely an accident of machinery. It was a moment where understanding was not enough, where the balance between power and caution was lost. And in that imbalance, the invisible became unforgettable. Now let us move closer, not to the explosion, not to the abandoned city, but to something far more concentrated, far more silent, deep within Reactor No. For at the Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant, there exists a form unlike anything nature would create on its own. It is called the elephant's foot. At first glance, it does not appear extraordinary. A dark, solid mass, rough, uneven, almost like cooled lava. It rests quietly, as if it has always been there. But this object was born in a moment of extreme heat and complete loss of control. When the reactor exploded during the Chernobyl disaster, temperatures inside rose to unimaginable levels. Fuel rods melted, concrete dissolved. Steel structures softened and collapsed. Everything, metal, sand, uranium, began to merge, flowing downward through the reactor like a slow, unstoppable liquid. This molten material is known as corium, and as it cooled, it hardened into this dense radioactive mass. The elephant's foot, it is not merely waste. It is a new substance, formed from the remnants of a failed system, a physical memory of that night. When it was first discovered, scientists approached it with caution and curiosity. They sent in cameras, they measured radiation levels. What they found was staggering. Standing near it for just a short time, seconds even, was enough to deliver a lethal dose of radiation. Not hours, not days. Moments so intense that electronic equipment began to fail. Cameras degraded, images distorted, because radiation does not only affect living cells, it breaks down materials themselves. Even machines are not immune. And yet there is something deeply quiet about it. It does not move. It does not glow brightly in warning. It simply exists, radiating energy continuously without pause. Like a silent pulse beneath the surface of the earth, over the years its intensity has decreased. Radioactive decay is, after all, a process of change. Even the most dangerous materials will eventually lose their power. But eventually, in this case, means decades, centuries, time far beyond a human lifetime. Today, the elephant's foot still remains one of the most radioactive objects on Earth, hidden within the structure that now contains Reactor No. 4, a place few can safely approach, a place where science must rely on distance, shielding, and patience. And perhaps this is what makes it so profound. It is not an explosion, not a fire, not a moment. It is the aftermath, a quiet, solid reminder that energy, once released without control, does not simply disappear. It transforms, it settles, it remains. If one were to stand before it, protected, at a distance, you would see nothing extraordinary, just a dark mass resting in stillness. And yet, within it, atoms continue to change, continuously, relentlessly. Invisible reactions unfolding second by second, a silent story still being written. In my lifetime, I studied radiation as something to understand, to illuminate, but here in this place, we see it in another form. Not as discovery, but as consequence. The elephant's foot does not speak. But if it did, it would tell us this, that even the smallest particles, when brought together without care, can leave behind something that endures far longer than we ever intended. Let us pause here not to observe the ruins, but to reflect on what they mean, because places like Chernobyl Exclusion Zone are not only physical, they are lessons, quiet ones, enduring ones. I devoted my life to the study of radiation, not to control it entirely, but to understand it, to reveal what was hidden, to bring light into the unknown. And I believed deeply that knowledge would guide humanity toward progress. But knowledge alone is not enough. At the heart of the Chernobyl disaster was not only a failure of machinery. It was something more human, a chain of decisions, small ones, each perhaps justified in the moment, each seeming insignificant until together they became irreversible. This is how many great tragedies unfold, not in a single dramatic instant, but in quiet steps, in overlooked warnings, in confidence that goes unquestioned. We often imagine danger as something obvious, something that announces itself, but the most profound dangers are often invisible. They do not shout, they wait. And so we must ask ourselves, what does it mean to hold such power, to split the atom, to release energy that was once bound within matter itself? It is not merely a scientific achievement, it is a responsibility. Because when we reach deeper into nature, we do not only discover its beauty, we also encounter its limits. Radiation does not forgive mistakes, it does not negotiate it. It follows its laws precisely, consistently, without exception. And in this there is something both frightening and honest. Nature does not intend harm, but it does not protect us from it either. That responsibility belongs to us. In the years since Chernobyl, the land has begun to change again. Forests have grown, animals have returned, life, in its quiet resilience, continues, and yet, beneath that renewal, the past remains. Invisible positioned, a reminder that time does not erase everything. Some consequences move slowly, too slowly for us to easily perceive, and perhaps this is where true understanding begins. Not in mastering nature, but in recognizing our place within it. We are not separate from these forces. We are participants, observers, and actors at the same time. I once said, nothing in life is to be feared, it is only to be understood. But understanding must lead to something more, to humility, to patience, to care. Because knowledge without reflection becomes risk, and power without wisdom becomes danger. Chernobyl is not only a story of what happened, it is a question still being asked. How do we move forward without forgetting? How do we continue to explore without losing respect for what we do not fully control? These are not questions for scientists alone, they belong to all of us, because the future we create is shaped not only by what we discover, but by how we choose to use it. And in the silence of that abandoned place, we are reminded that even in the absence of people, our decisions remain echoing, Far beyond the moment in which they were made, time has passed. Decades since the night of the Chernobyl disaster, and yet this place has not been forgotten. It has simply changed. What was once a site of urgency has become a place of observation. The Chernobyl Exclusion Zone still exists, a wide controlled boundary where human presence is limited, measured and cautious. It is no longer chaos, it is controlled silence. Scientists now walk where residents once lived, not freely, but with instruments in hand. They measure radiation in the soil, in the water, in the air. They track how it moves, how it fades, how it lingers. Because radiation does not disappear all at once. It diminishes slowly, almost patiently. Some isotopes have already decayed into safer forms. Others remain embedded in the environment, releasing energy one atom at a time. This is the rhythm of the place now. Not sudden destruction, but gradual transformation. And something unexpected has happened. Life has returned. Forests have grown thicker than before. Wild animals, wolves, deer, birds have reclaimed the land. In the absence of human activity, nature has moved forward without hesitation. It does not ask permission, it does not wait for conditions to be perfect. It adapts, quietly. And yet this is not a simple story of recovery, because what we see is only part of the truth. Radiation is still present. Not everywhere equally, but enough to shape the environment in ways we are still trying to understand. Some areas remain highly contaminated, others appear almost normal. This unevenness creates a landscape that is both alive and altered. A place where life exists under different conditions. There are also people, though not as before. A small number of former residents have returned to the edges of the zone. Drawn back by memory, by attachment to land, by something deeper than safety alone, they live quietly. Growing food, maintaining homes, accepting the risks in exchange for familiarity, and beyond them, there are visitors. Carefully guided, measured, wearing dosimeters that track exposure in real time. They walk through the empty streets of Pripyat, past rusting playgrounds, silent apartment blocks, classrooms frozen in time. It has become, in a way, a place of learning, not through books, but through presence, through seeing what remains when something goes wrong at such a scale. Above Reactor No 4, a massive steel structure now stands, a protective shell designed to contain what still lies within. It does not erase the past, but it prevents it from spreading further. It is a gesture of responsibility made after the fact, a recognition that even decades later, action is still required. And so today, Chernobyl exists in a state that is difficult to define. It is not entirely dangerous, not entirely safe, not entirely abandoned, not fully alive. It is something in between, a place where science continues, where nature adapts, where memory persists. And perhaps this is what modern Chernobyl truly represents. Not just a disaster frozen in history, but an ongoing relationship between humanity and the forces it has unleashed. A reminder that consequences do not end when headlines fade. They evolve, they settle into the world, becoming part of it. And in that quiet, evolving landscape, we are given something rare. The opportunity to observe, to learn, not only from what happened, but from what continues to happen. Because the story of Chernobyl is not over, it has simply become slower, quieter, and in many ways deeper than before. And now we come to the end. Not of the story, but of our journey through it. The place we have explored, the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone, still stands, quiet, unmoving, as it has for decades. The winds pass through it, the trees continue to grow. Life, in its quiet persistence, moves forward. And yet, something remains not only in the Ardrom, but in us, because Chernobyl is not just a place on a map, it is a moment that continues to echo. A reminder of what happens when knowledge moves faster than wisdom, when control is assumed rather than ensured, and still there is no need for fear, only understanding. Radiation, like all forces of nature, is neither kind nor cruel. It simply is. It follows its laws without hesitation. The responsibility has always been ours. To learn, to question, to proceed with care. I spent my life studying something invisible, something many did not yet understand, and I believed deeply that through knowledge we could bring light into darkness. That belief remains. But now we see more clearly. Knowledge must be guided by humility, by patience, by respect for what we do not fully control. Because even in silence, consequences endure. Even when no one is watching, the world continues to respond. So as you leave this story, carry not fear, but awareness, not doubt, but curiosity, and above all, a quiet respect for the unseen forces that shape our world, for in understanding them, we do not become more powerful. We become more responsible, and that is where true progress begins.